everybody. I hope you happy almost Cinco de Mayo, the holiday that we celebrate that no one in Mexico does. But I explain every time we go how much fun we have with it anyway. If we could start today with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Peter New, would you lead us in the pledge today? Director New?
Certainly. Pleasure. Please stand, if possible. On 3, 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And if you, Madam Clerk, if you would call roll, please.
Yes, thank you. Before I call roll, just a reminder, any of our committee members who might be participating by phone, you can press *9 to make a comment. And then we would ask, if you are not speaking, if you could please mute your device. Director Baines?
Present.
Bulahan?
Here.
Clark-Kretz?
Here.
Frost?
Present.
Gore?
Here.
Harris?
Here.
New?
Here.
West?
Here.
Vice Chair Kennedy?
Here.
And Chair Gallardo?
Yes, thank you. Oh, okay, and I apologize. It looks like maybe my internet connection is being a little bit slow. If everybody had an opportunity to review we will start with public comment. And Lynette, do we have any public on with us today?
No, no public comment.
And nothing on Zoom or in writing?
No comments.
All right, thank you. Well, we will close public comment and move on to our first action item, which is to review the minutes from our April meeting. If everyone has had an opportunity to look at those, I would love a motion.
New moves to approve.
I'll second.
Chair Gallardo, should I go ahead and call roll?
Thank you. I think I had a little freeze up there again. So we have a motion and a second. If you could call roll to approve.
Thank you. Director Baines?
Aye.
Bulahan?
Aye.
Clark-Kretz?
Aye.
Frost?
Aye.
Gore?
Aye.
Harris?
Yes.
New?
Aye.
West?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kennedy?
Aye.
And Chair Gallardo?
Yes, thank you.
Motion carries.
Okay.
I think Chair Gallardo might still be having some technical difficulties. Vice Chair Kennedy, would you like to go ahead and start with our information items?
Happy to. Next item, please.
Our next item is Regional Early Action Planning Non-Competitive Grants. Jennifer Hargrove is scheduled to provide this presentation. Jennifer, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Thanks, Jennifer Hargrove with your SACOG staff. Today I have an informational item to keep the committee up to date on our Regional Early Action Planning Program, or the REAP program. I'm using presentation number 1 from our website on the agenda page. The REAP program, you'll recall, was born out of the 2019 budget and legislative session. It created this program where regional agencies like SACOG and our peers across the state are getting one-time funding for housing planning. SACOG has been allocated just under $6.8 million, and this money comes to us through HCD, the State Department of Housing and Community Development. Overall, the state's goal for this funding is that it's used to accelerate housing production, but it's planning dollars, not capital dollars. So as SACOG, as we thought about how we best utilize these funds, we brought forward frameworks to this committee and the board about a year ago. And we started with these guiding principles. We want to accelerate housing, but we also want to support the MTP-SCS goals. So we want to support an increase in housing product choice, as well as increase in housing in our infill areas. And because it's one-time funding, we also wanted to demonstrate to the state how we as a region might, how we could be innovative and really leverage this funding with our other efforts, such as Green Means Go. In early 2020, the board took 2 actions to approve frameworks that really outlined how we would spend our full $6.7 million in REAP dollars. This slide shows at a very high level the major program areas and how we've allocated that REAP funding within them. In March of this year, I updated this committee with the progress on the first few items listed here. So I'll just note that these activities are all underway. I'm happy to dive in and answer any questions at the end, but my intention for today was really to focus on just one area where the most recent updates have been happening, and that's the non-competitive grants. So the bulk of our REAP funding has been allocated $2.8 million to non-competitive grants for cities and counties. The dollar amount for each jurisdiction was predetermined in the frameworks that the board adopted last year. And the dollar amounts were based on the number of units each agency was allocated in the regional housing needs allocation that's fueling all of your housing elements right now as well. Attachment A in your staff report lists each agency, the dollar amount allocated, and is also just really intended to give you a very high level concept of the types of projects that will be happening across the region as we use these dollars. We did request that each agency send us an application so that we could understand how they intend to use the funds, ensure that their projects meet the state goals as well as our program goals. And we wrapped up those applications in March and April. So as you look through the list in attachment A, you'll see there is a wide range of housing planning activities. And just very generally at a high level, we've lumped them into a few categories to show how these planning projects are really helping to contribute to increased housing production. So many projects are falling into this increasing supply overall. As your staff do rezones for the housing elements, or you're doing specific plans, these are all going to increase how much housing is planned for in our region. One of the most notable is the city of Sacramento increasing the allowed density on single family parcels to allow up to 4 units in these single family home areas. But it's a wide range and everyone's doing rezones. So, equally important, Wheatland is looking at a rezoning project that will take 40 acres of lower density housing and rezone it hopefully to more medium density housing. So that has an equally significant impact on that community. Some REAP projects are targeting process improvements, like the city of Citrus Heights moving towards an online permitting system. Some projects are about creating more certainty in the development process, such as we see in the city of Davis, doing a historic resource inventory and some process streamlining around their historic resource commission. Additionally, many projects are helping to reduce time or cost in the approval phase for housing projects. So all the rezone work really falls in that bucket as well, as does the process improvements, but also projects like updating your accessory dwelling unit ordinance or the ADU handbook that Yuba County is planning to do with their REAP dollars. Finally, there's a few projects, like notably the one in Placer County, where they're looking really holistically at the infrastructure challenges and the infrastructure needs when you're planning for more housing in some of these existing communities. So all together, they all are helping in their own way accelerate housing production, but through planning projects. The majority of these projects are in the early stages of project formation. So we have the concept. The next step is really that we begin to work with each agency on the scope of work, and then we can execute a contract, a memorandum of understanding or an MOU. And that really is what will allow us to pass those funds through to those local agencies. Some jurisdictions moving faster than others, but we hope that over the next few months that we have signed MOUs with each agency and all of these exciting projects can begin moving forward. Jurisdictions will have about 2 years to spend the funds. The funds have to be expended by July of 2023. To help with these projects, SACOG has procured a bench of consultants who specialize in housing planning and housing related activities. So the way the bench works is that SACOG did the RFP and the procurement process, and we have contracts with 8 consulting firms. And now we can issue task orders to any of them on an individual project basis. So if a city or county wants consultant assistance with their REAP funded project, that jurisdiction could select a vendor, a consultant from our bench, and issue a task order through us and basically bypass your typical procurement process. So it's an option, and we do have a few agencies looking into doing it, which is pretty exciting. It's the first time we've done this. It's not, I'm sorry, it's not the first time we've done this bench, but it is, I think, our biggest opportunity to date to have the funding and have the bench and have some jurisdictions using it. So understandably, though, some agencies are going to use this funding to pay for their own staff time. Some are using it to pay for consultants they already have. So it's not a requirement at all that you use the bench. It's just an option that we think will help out some projects. So what's next? As I mentioned, we're already beginning to work with your staff, and we want to get these MOUs executed so projects can start. That really is a big milestone for this REAP program. It's our largest allocation of funding. So, at 2.8 million, getting all these projects going is pretty significant for the REAP program. The next piece of the overall REAP budget is a $1.7 million competitive grant program. That application period closed in mid-March. We received 7 applications. Together, in total, what was requested was about 2.5 million, and we have 1.7, so it's competitive. I don't anticipate every project being recommended for funding since the amount exceeds what we have available. But this competitive award process is the focus of the REAP item that I'll bring to you next month for discussion and deliberation. So we can't really get into the details on it too much today because the review committee that's reviewing the applications are still finalizing their recommendations, which I'll bring forward again next month. So I do just want to give the committee a heads up that this will be an action coming to you next month. And we got 7 really great applications. So should be an exciting discussion next month as well. And with that, that's the update I wanted to share. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll turn it back over to the chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm just scanning to see if I'm still the chair. It looks like I am. So with that, are there any questions of the board? Chair's back.
Hey, I think I'm back. Thank you. I don't know how hopefully I'm back to stay. For some reason, it's not having a good day.
You had better connectivity in Mexico.
I seriously, in my own, yeah, I know. Now I just threatened everyone in the house to try to make sure everything's off. We'll see if this works now. Thank you so much. Well, we are going to move on to our next information item, and this is where we're going to do the deep dive into forest health management and learn more than we ever thought we would know. So I know we have a couple guests from PCWA and also from CROP, but if we will turn it over to our own Renee DeVere-Oki, and she will introduce our guests. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon. Renee DeVere-Oki from your planning staff. So just as noted, we're going to take a deep dive on forest health management today. And so before I hand it over to our presenters, I wanted to provide a little bit of framing on what you're hearing and how it aligns with our Coordinated Rural Opportunities Plan, which we keep calling CROP, which is this year's initiative for our Rural Urban Connection Strategies program. So we did talk about CROP a little bit back in February. So one data point that I always like highlighting when we talk about CROP, our RUCS program, is that 80% of our MTP plan area is actually designated for ag or open space or timber uses. And so there's a lot happening out in that 80%. How it's managed and the partnerships involved impact our economy, our health, and long-term sustainability of our region. Things like our 6-county air quality or water, and even our $2 billion ag economy. So this presentation is going to set up the stage for our future conversations on regional infrastructure and assets like our forest and watershed and innovative partnerships, which you'll see here. And all this is very important foundational work for CROP, which we'll be kicking off and going with over the next year or so. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our two presenters today. So we have Tony Frenzy from the Placer County Water Agency, who is their Director of Strategic Affairs, and then also Jay Ziegler from the Nature Conservancy, who is their Policy and External Affairs Director for California. So off to you, Tony.
Thank you, Renee. Sorry for that pause. I had to find the unmute button. First, is my screen shared? I'm seeing a head shake, so I'll take that as yes. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so the presentation today is about forest health and what the value of forest health is in our watershed, in our natural infrastructure. Some people call this green infrastructure. My objective or my role in this presentation is to sort of illustrate or impress upon you why is a water agency getting involved in this. PCWA is one water agency of more than 20 in the Sacramento region. And so some people think it's odd that this, one water agency got involved in this. And so I'm going to be sort of illustrating that. And then Jay Ziegler with the Nature Conservancy, and I'll let him sort of tee himself up, but he's going to be covering some of the higher level elements of this and what it all means for all of us. Before I go on, I just want to make some thank yous out there. First, thank you to SACOG and your board for sort of opening up your floor for this presentation today. It really is a great platform for us to present to. I've not presented to SACOG before, so I'm happy to be here. I'd like to thank the Nature Conservancy. They're a partner in this endeavor that PCWA has been involved in, a critical partner. They've brought funding, they've brought science, and they've brought advocacy, and there really is a great partnership with them. And also another critical partner who's actually represented on your board is Placer County. Placer County is a partner in our watershed activities with hydropower. And with that, they're also a partner in our forest health initiative, both in terms of leadership, actual work on the ground, and in funding. So I want to thank those folks today. So with that, I'll move on. I'm going to move very fast. I just want to illustrate a little bit about what forest health and wildfire mean, but because it's been in the media so much lately, I am going to move at a high tempo. But our watershed is a resource to this region, to the entire SACOG footprint. And the reasons for that, it's a water supply for many, many people. It provides power, hydropower resources to us. It provides an ecosystem, it provides recreation, and so many different things. There's, I don't need to say this, but many people move to our region in part because of our location to the mountains and to the headwaters and so forth. And so it really is quite something to be valued, cherished, and appreciated. But unfortunately, a big part of those mountains is at risk, and that's forests, as you know. And the reasons for that are somewhat obvious. We've had climate change. overcrowded trees and drought, they've all led to unhealthy forests. The bark beetle was allowed to be introduced, and things progressed. And that's led to wildfire as we know it. And the impacts of that are far, far reaching. PCWA has been directly impacted, but we've all been directly impacted. Among the top of those, in my opinion, is air quality. I can't think of a single person in this region that hasn't had the thought of, is this livable in the last few years when the fire season starts earlier and it ends later. It used to be thought of as maybe a 2-month window, and it's starting to grow into maybe, a third of the year at this point. But the impacts go far beyond air quality, and we'll be talking a little about that. This is just a sampling of an overcrowded forest. It's actually a little understated here. This is I didn't put this presentation together, and I probably would have chosen a denser picture. I would call this sort of middle of the road for density of trees in our forests, our watershed, but they really are overgrown. This is sort of illustrative of what has happened here. So I guess what I want to talk about is what happened in the last century that led to our overcrowded forests. So there was a fire in 1910. It was a big one. It was called the Big Blow Up. Kind of an odd name for a fire, but maybe things were just a little odd back then. But yeah, the Big Blow Up. It was a giant fire up in Idaho and Montana. 3 million acres. It was considered just catastrophic for the West. 3 million, a single 3 million acre fire. That led to kind of a standard of care of the forest that basically we prohibit all fire. And a lot of us on this meeting today grew up in the Smokey the Bear era, right? We were all told to make sure there's no fires, and that led to overcrowded forests over about 100-year period. And so here we are 100 years later, from 1910 to 2010, or now 2020, so 110 years later, with the situation we have. And this photo just shows mid last century, the same spot. I can't actually see it, but I think it's 2007 there, of the same photo. And you can see the increase in tree density in that spot there. And drought. This image here sort of paints a visceral image in all of your water managers. I said there's more than 20 water managers in the Sacramento American River region. This is a photo of Folsom Lake. And this image is sort of imprinted in all of our water manager minds about what can happen with drought. This is from 2014. Drought is a big factor, and we seem to be headed into one this year. And with that came the bark beetle and devastation to our trees, both from drying out and from infestation. Naturally, as all species, if we get weaker, we open ourselves up to infestation. So with that, so now I get into, how did PCWA get involved in this? This is a photo from Lake Tahoe in 2014 from the King Fire. I'm curious. I'd be curious to find out at the end if any of you actually know the name King Fire. I hope so, because it was a big deal for us. And so, yeah, this is a photo of Lake Tahoe. It's a real dramatic photo of what was happening. Well, this took place in our watershed, and it threatened PCWA among many others, and including the natural ecosystem of our forest. This is an image after the King Fire of what happened to the landscape. It destroyed the trees. It cooked the soils for, several inches, if not feet, down into the sort of soil layer. And it sort of ruined the value of that landscape for growing forests. And then this is what happened. So, the following winter, as the rains begin, and after the drought, we had a few very wet winters with intense rains, and naturally that exposed landscape then just results in sediment making its way down into the lower American River. Well, here's a PCWA facility. This is one of our downstream smaller reservoirs, and all of that sediment found its way into this reservoir. You also see a tree line sort of in the middle of the image there. It's kind of called a snag line. It was put in to snag all the trees that would start flowing downstream as they fail and roll down the hillsides. and then all of the sediment in this reservoir. So PCWA ended up spending about $5 million on mitigating the damage to our reservoir from that fire. In addition to that, the fire threatened some of our other key resources. And I'm going to show you a map in a minute. And that really gets into, you know, why is PCWA involved in this? And then water quality. This is an image of the confluence of the North Fork of the American River with the Middle Fork of the American River. PCWA operates on the Middle Fork of the American River. I guess I probably should have said this. I went very fast, but for those don't know, so PCWA, we're a county-wide agency. We have a hydropower system up on the Middle Fork of the American River. It happens to be called our Middle Fork Project. And so that's where we operate, and that's where this fire occurred. And here's at the downstream confluence near Highway 49, just downhill from Auburn. And you can see the change in water quality that came from that runoff. Well, it's not just something that affects, you know, what we do with the water, but it also affects the ecosystem. So these on the left is what yellow-legged frog eggs should look like under the water, but on the right is an image of the aftermath of the King Fire. And so that sediment has impacts beyond the impacts to our treated water systems and what we do with the water and having to deal with that or cleaning out our reservoirs. It also affects our environment. And so just to put it all into perspective here. So this is our watershed for the American River system. A big part of SACOG relies upon this natural system for water and everything that we talked about on that first slide. And so PCWA's Middle Fork project is right up in there, and you can see the King Fire. So to put things into perspective, that fire was 97,000 acres, if my memory serves me correctly. As we always say, just right near 100,000 acres. The biggest fire that we'd ever seen in the American River watershed prior to the King Fire was 27,000 acres. And most of the other fires that we'd seen were much, much less than that, like below 10,000 acres. So when this fire occurred, locally, we thought, this is a mega fire. This is the biggest thing you could imagine. I didn't know fires like this occurred. And it really is different. What that kind of fire does to the landscape is different than what those smaller fires that we were more accustomed to do. It really scorches that part of the landscape, and it just changes the paradigm for what that landscape will ever look like. It's hard to bring a forest back when it's been cooked at that intensity. So that was 100,000 acres of forest fire. These days, that's nothing. And I think Jay will be talking about that as we go on. I'd mentioned the big blow up before. That was a 3 million acre fire. So that was a big one in 1910. Well, last year, California alone tallied over 4 million acres. So this problem is getting serious. And I know Jay, I don't want to steal his thunder. He's going to be talking a good bit about that. So what's most important for me now is this is where I bring it home and tell you, why is PCWA involved in this? It's really three reasons. One is we're trying to protect our immediate assets. So we have a power system right up there. The fire actually burned one of our power lines, and then it caused immediate and expensive damage to our downstream reservoir. So we need to protect our immediate assets. The other reason that PCWA is involved in how do we make healthy forest is it's really a risk mitigation measure. As operators of systems, and for many of you, you oversee, cities and land use jurisdictions and roadways and that kind of thing. And so you're running on operations. And when you run operations of that scale and where your public relies upon you, you want things to be steady and smooth and predictable. And you just want things to hum along. And when you have disruptors like this kind of an event, it really can be catastrophic. From many, many standpoints, both in your ability to provide the service you're supposed to provide, but also in terms of your cash flow. So we really need to stabilize things. We've done some avoided cost analysis to look at, is it worth investing up front so that in the end, we avoid those sort of black swans, if you will? And the answer is yes. And then finally, and it's certainly last but not least, is environmental stewardship. As water managers, we're always involved in in sort of negotiations and accords about how we divert water in a manner that is copacetic with aquatic habitat and fish populations and that. And I think most people understand, even those not involved in the water business, understand that there's always a tension and hopefully collaboration that goes on with managing water supplies for people and for the environment. Well, that same environmental obligation exists in the forest. The forest is part of that system, and how we manage it and how we treat it and take care of it. It's a headwaters issue. And so that's the third reason, is sort of an obligation of stewardship over our natural resources. And that's why we've been able to sort of bring the Association of California Water Agencies and water agencies throughout the state. It took many years, and King Fire was a big part of it, to get a recognition that headwaters is part of our statewide water system. And that, you hear people talk about the water system doesn't just begin at the Tehachapi's or at the Delta. It actually begins up here in our watershed. And we've been able to get water agencies around the state to get involved in this. So I'd like to talk about what we've done. Oops, let me make sure. Can you see I just have to ask, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So these are our two reservoirs in our hydropower system right here. And you can see the King Fire sort of wrapped around what's called Hellhole Reservoir. And then here's French Meadows Reservoir. Well, right about that same time, the American River Conservancy was engaged in forest health initiative that surrounded sort of the Lake Tahoe Basin. It happened to go right up next to, French Meadows Reservoir right here. So we chose a great pilot project where PCWA could get involved in leadership of a forest health project. And the Nature Conservancy partnered with us, along with Placer County, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, and many others, to sort of engage in that process. And the project looks like this. This is our French Meadows Reservoir, and all the polygons of color you see right there is treatment. The yellow is mechanical thinning, where we send crews up and heavy equipment and that kind of thing. And that's work that's ongoing right now. And then the red, once we get things stabilized, is what's called prescribed fire controlled burn areas. And all told, all of that area is 20,000 acres. So we plan on treating 20,000 acres around this reservoir. The project is going to cost around, it's not fully funded yet, but it's going to cost about $30 million. We are about half funded. We've got about 15 million of that 30 million. Just and it is important for this kind of gets into how did PCWA get involved and how do we get others involved. Of that $15 million, 5 of it has come from timber receipts. The 10 of it, 1 million has come from PCWA and Placer County in our cost share. And then the other 9 million has come from state and federal funds and from money that the Nature Conservancy has brought in from private companies, trying to sort of, if you will, green up their portfolios and invest in this kind of thing. And so what I'd like to say here is that even though PCWA is a local leader in getting this kind of work done, we're not the biggest cost share or the biggest funder of it. We've gotten a great return on investment. I think 10 times return on investment is pretty good, so that's the project. But the idea, we're not done with French Meadows. This is a project, this is sort of a pilot. We want to scale this up. We've kind of sized up the needs of our watershed, the Middle Fork and the North Fork of the American River, and estimate that there's about 5 of these that need to be done. So for about 100,000 acres in sort of the North Fork portion of the American River system. But then if you want to account for the South Fork, you might double that. So we have about 200,000 acres of forest treatment. I would call that a guess right now. We're applying some science to really size up what needs to be done in our watershed. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay, and he's going to talk at a higher level. What does all this mean for beyond PCWA? So Jay, and
Sure.
I guess I'm driving for you, so I'll try to.
Yeah. All right. Well, give me a second here. I do appreciate this time. I think the work that Placer County Water Agency, that Tony and Andy Fecco are doing is really path-breaking. As Tony noted, they have really brought all California water agencies to better understand the importance of our watersheds and the real threat that we all confront from mega fires. And whether with respect to SACOG, whichever of the 6 counties you're in, whatever of the 22 cities you're in this region. And I'm coming to you today from Davis and Yolo County. We are all in this together. And I just want to kind of show you this capsule slide that I think captures the magnitude of this threat. From 1932 to 1999 in California, what this tells you is 573,000 acres burned. And then in the next 19 years, we lost 2.7 million acres burned. And last year alone in 2020, 4.4 million acres burned, almost 5% of California burned last year. So that, I think, just pause for a moment and think about the acceleration of the threat of fire all around us. And in a sense, this is why the Nature Conservancy is involved now. Tony, well, let's go to the next slide, or just to maybe digest that is great, because I think you may wonder, like, what's an environmental group doing in this anyway? And the Nature Conservancy is a science-based organization, and what we've learned, as Tony noted, after a century of very aggressive fire management across the Western forests, what happens is our forests grow back overly dense. And so that's the picture that Tony was showing you, that rather than broad, healthy trees, what we have today is a forest that is growing 10 times the density of trees per acre as naturally occurring conditions prior to the 1800s. And these forests are inherently unhealthy and vulnerable to disease. Next slide. What you can see here is the beginnings, actually, of one of the areas of the American River project that Tony was talking about. When we're looking at the need to thin our forests, it requires active management of the landscape. And the only way we're going to have healthy ecosystem values is active management of the forests. Next.
Try it here. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So, and the Nature Conservancy has kind of taken a multidisciplinary approach to this. And what I want to share with all of you is, as we are in this together, there's no silver bullet solution. It's not going to be federal action alone. It's not going to be state action alone. It's not regional action alone. It's not private sector action alone. It's all of those things coming together. Recently, we partnered with Bain Consulting to really take a dive into how do we accelerate private capital investment in active forest management. And what this really led us to realize is that there is no silver bullet. We have to actually be working just about every level of the system for reforms in order to achieve progress. Next slide. So what we looked at with Bain was kind of how do we increase demand for domestic production of wood-related fiber and forest products and biomass energy. And as you kind of jump to the solution set here, it's worth slowing down a little to look at the graph, because what we've really arrived at is we need a new formula for mill placement across the Sierra Nevada, in which we're looking at integrating all facets of wood product and energy development at the same time that we're thinking about how we locate these mills in areas that reduce transport of logs, which is really the economic challenge that timber companies face in getting wood out of the forest and to production facilities. So we've got to stimulate this environment for innovation and co-location of these kind of wood utilization campuses across the Sierra, if you will. Next slide. Now, there is good news. We've been working together with Placer County Water Agency, the Association of California Water Agencies, and a group that Placer County and Placer County Water Agency and the Nature Conservancy were really active in standing up. It includes private landowners, the U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, and other partners in the Sierra to really focus on the threats to the Sierra Nevada, and that's called the California Watershed Alliance. And what this group has been working on and delivering in the budget process to the state is really thinking about what are the subsidies we need to bring in private investment. And so a part of that, in this year's budget that we succeeded on, was getting us a climate catalyst fund into the governor's budget, and then a subsidy for transport of wood materials to facilities that is in the Senate budget proposal. Next slide. So what comes together in the end here is that we all need to realize that our forests are our natural capital. They are essential for recreation and multiple values. And candidly, I think the part of the environmental movement that TNC is a part of is really recognizing that unless we actively manage our forests, as that first slide I showed you showed, we will actually lose our forests. And we have to approach this crisis with that level of urgency. Next. So here's where we really see that, we bring multiple values together. And I think that part of this water agencies working together with environmental groups is really kind of showing, as we work together, we better understand each other's cultures and how we can use, I guess, comparative expertise and relationships and values to work together. Next slide. This is how the Nature Conservancy looks at watersheds throughout California. And the short story to looking at this map is that the more color you see on the map, the more diverse the ecosystem values are. And so you can see where that takes you to critical areas for freshwater conservation are yes, the north coast of California, which generally gets more rain than the rest of the state, but then across the Sierra Nevada and to coastal California. And the Sierra Nevada, as Tony mentioned earlier, is also the source of 60% of California's drinking water. And so the integration of management values for freshwater ecosystems and for forests is abundantly clear when you look at the mosaic of freshwater ecosystem values across the Sierra Nevada. And this is also important in the context of both the new announcement from the Biden administration today of conserving and restoring America's beautiful natural assets. And so there's the aim of that effort is conserve 30% of ecosystems across the United States by 2030. And it's how we do that is going to be absolutely critical to success in terms of reducing climate and fire risk. Next slide. And I think we all see and experience the impacts of fire quite directly in the smoke that is choking urban areas across the state. Next slide. And really to better quantify this, we've worked with Stanford University recently and I'm happy to kind of send this study back to you all to review, because I think it really ties the public health nexus of these mega fires to the need for constant landscape management to reduce the threat of these horrific smoke storms that we've experienced in 2 of the last 3 years. Next slide. So as Tony noted earlier, we have to get back to the business of more actively thinning our forests to drive both ecological health as well as reducing fire risk. There are 130 million dead and dying trees across the Sierra, and this work has to have a level of urgency. Next slide. The benefits, as Tony noted earlier, in thinning our forests is that we do see some additional water yield from the forest, better percolation of snow melt into the groundwater table and into stream flows. And So there is a water benefit that is challenging to measure and different on different watersheds. But more specifically, as Tony noted, these mega fires burn differently than fires did before us. And they virtually seal the surface of soils to work something like a cement and create substantial landslide risk. Tony, on the next slide, please. Where we see tremendous additional landslide potential across virtually every region that has experienced these fires. And this is one of our particular worries in response to the King Fire. Next slide. So again, no single entity can get this all accomplished. We're working with Placer County Water Agency, other partners across California and at the federal level to have a more integrated approach to forest management. I think this is a picture not unlike what you often see on a day trip through the Sierra today. And we would like to see the utilization of that biomass into better societal benefit, smart biomass energy development and development of wood products. Next slide. And then I just, these partnerships are organic. They require, again, partnerships across federal, state agencies, private sector companies, non-governmental organizations like ours, and local government is the backbone to building local support to make these innovative partnerships work. Next slide. And I think we're also learning a lot through this. I think Tony and I would be the first to say that we don't have all the answers in how we proceed. We, the Nature Conservancy, are working now in the Yuba watershed with the Yuba County Water Agency and other partners, Forest Service, CAL FIRE, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, and other partners, as well as looking at and that's about a 400,000 acre area. I think Tony was talking about a 200,000 acre region in the Northern American watershed, 400,000 acres that need treatment in the Yuba watershed. And we're learning constantly about how to do this more effectively with more science and adaptive management applied on the ground to how we approach each region. Next slide.
Is that it, Jay? Or you want me?
Yep. So I think the upshot is what we're saying today is that we are all in this together, and that we have to have an active partnership across this region and really a regional approach on the ground everywhere we work to manage the Sierra and the forest to the values that I think we all cherish.
I'm just going to close up with where do we go from here? So like I said before, PCWA is only one of more than 20 water agencies in this region. But we have a big footprint, particularly in terms of breadth of what we do. We generate hydropower. That's sort of obvious from this presentation as to how we got involved in this. But we use the water that comes from that hydropower system for our water deliveries. We serve both agricultural and municipal needs in Placer County and actually North Sacramento County. We provide wholesale water out of Folsom Lake. We provide retail water out of our own water system. And from an agricultural perspective, which I think is a big part of this platform here, we have a canal system. That canal system is 170 miles long. And on that system, we have customers that range from small citrus and hobby farms in the Loomis Basin and, even some livestock, alpaca, that kind of thing, all the way to commercial agriculture, rice fields, and that kind of thing in West Placer County. So we kind of cover the whole gamut. And in order to realize the commitments that we've made to deliver to all of those needs, we need to be engaged in this kind of thing. And we're partners with the Regional Water Authority. Most of the water agencies in this region are part of that authority where we plan together. And what we're planning for is resilience. We're looking at the long-term sustainability of our water system in terms of water for people, water for the environment. And you see on here just a mix, and I'm not going to go into them, but there's a mix of solutions for resiliency to climate change. Well, highlighted there is forest management. And what PCWA has been able to do, in addition to sort of getting a voice across California, but even a voice locally to get all of our water agencies engaged in this process. And so where are we? Just a little bit here, and this will wrap it up. For those that don't know, there is a state of California and federal MOU where they're trying to treat 1 million acres a year. It's a it's a voluntary MOU. What our job is to keep the state and federal governments moving or sort of engaged in that commitment. And just for comparison, there's about 30 million acres of forest in California. The state of California has taken it seriously. There was a recent early budget action for $500 million. It was going to be 300 million, and the Senate said that's not enough. We want more, and they went to 500 million. And then we have a budget pending here for $1 billion, and that got elevated too. Again, because the Senate expressed you're not taking it seriously enough. We want to see money invested in this. The French Meadows project, just to scale things down to local conditions, 20,000 acres. We have an estimated 200,000 acres to go. And our project is only 50% funded. So we've got some work to do. And then there's a need for technical expertise. We need to remove barriers. As Jay had said, we're always learning, and I won't go into the details, but there's a lot there. And final conclusions, forest health is integral to our green infrastructure. I think that's obvious. And there's multi-benefits that come from it. I'd like to say that, where does the obligation rest? Jay made it clear, it's everyone. And I wish I could edit that middle bullet right there. It's federal, it's state, and it's local funding. And let me just mix in with local funding, that includes private. I'd like to think of it as a three-legged stool. The state and the feds need to do their part, and we need to do our part. And my hunch is it should be about equal. Now, PCWA and Nature Conservancy in Placer County, we've done better than that because, like I said, out of $10 million in cash, we've only had to spend about $1 million. But I would say it should, at the end of the day, maybe it's a third. And here's the call to action, local leadership. What we've found is if you say, oh, well, that's federal forest, so the feds need to do something about that. Write a letter to my congressperson, and tell them to do something about that forest. It won't happen. The efforts need to spawn from local leadership. The state and the feds will invest in you if you locally lead it. And that's my call to action for all of the leaders, including yourselves in this region, is to sort of inspire the importance of this and get these things going. It can't just be the water agencies, it needs to be all of us. And the benefits go across all of our region. And science and adaptive management will keep us moving forward. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. And I think for me personally, I really appreciated, clearly I'm a visual learner, but just looking at those maps really put it in perspective. And I think one of the ones that jumps out at me, besides the fact of why the fires impact the water so much, was just that size. When you show the other fires about a quarter of what the King Fire was, is pretty amazing. I am going to turn it over and ask if anyone has any questions for Jay and for Tony.
I have questions, but may I make a I really appreciate the update and just the overview. And what I appreciate about SACOG is this opportunity to learn about issues that affect all of us, whether it's air quality, water quality, how this affects housing in the future. And I became aware of the King Fire and its devastation because Brian Bierkamp in El Dorado County took SACOG on a tour of forest health, I guess in 2019. And it was so eye-opening to understand how our forests have been devastated and all the effects of it. And I just really appreciate that opportunity that SACOG provided for all of us to learn. And then actually as a result of what I learned from Brian, they have a vegetation management ordinance that they put into place in El Dorado County, which we have done in Placer County. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity to learn from one another. And so thanks to you guys, but thanks to SACOG for helping us just continue to learn about how we can work together.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore. I think, and you may have been there, and I'm thinking a few others were, but we do a city, county, Placer County dinner every once in a while, and different cities host. And a few years back, we did it up at Colfax, overlooking the canyon, and that was just a fabulous way to really put it in perspective also, and look at the density. But I think today, again, just the connection on how Placer County and basically is supplying 60% of the water, I believe you said, how it connects to our air quality and everything we do. And I am really hopeful that people are paying attention finally, because it is May 6th and we've had fires already. And I don't remember that ever in our past. So I really appreciate this. Any other questions anybody have for Martine? Okay. Well, I think I see Director Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, Tony and Jay, I really appreciated your presentations. I was also on that tour with Member Gore up in the foothills, and it was sobering. The situation up there was sobering, and it was a heartfelt when we saw how the soil, even down under the soil, was destroyed, and came to understand that those trees it's not going to grow back the same. That was heartbreaking, especially for those of us that have been hiking up there all our lives. But this might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it. I'm curious because I've been on those cap to cap trips back to Washington, D.C., and we've talked to FEMA, and we've had those conversations around, the cost associated with forest management and versus responding after a fire event, and how, they're just devastated by all the costs of the last decade or two because of the forest health being so, I guess, deferred maintenance, or whatever you want to call it. And these are all federally owned and managed lands, right? So are they?
Overwhelmingly so, yes.
And I just saw a map the other day. I was blown away that on the map it showed that most of the Western United States, a big part of the land is controlled by the federal government, but the Eastern part of the United States, it belongs to the states, which was really surprising. And I'm not sure I know the history on that, but are there any conversations around if the federal government is not able to manage it, would they or should they, since we're taking on the expense and the effort to manage the forests, and we're taking the liability, it's our citizens who have homes up there that can't be insured, whose economies are devastated, to a transfer of those lands back to the state, so that we can manage it. I wonder if those conversations ever happen, or how that work. How is this working like this? It's federally maintained, but it's not being maintained. So can you speak to that at all, or did I put you on the spot?
Jay would be the right one.
Yeah, well, let me address that in a couple of ways, actually. One, there is a pretty long, complex history to federal land designations. And I'm going to kind of weave into that in a bit, that one of the breakthroughs that we've had in California is taking an all lands approach with CAL FIRE, with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, with the Forest Service, to look at how we scientifically prioritize areas for protection better. And how we bring resources to the ground more effectively, thinking less about where the ownership is, but where the risk is, and how we actually mitigate fire risk better. And in that context, we are also working with the insurers to try to stand up more active ways of approaching both the ability to do more controlled burns on the landscape, which is essential, as well as providing ways for mutual aid, mutual support, better scientific identification of hot spots and places that are likely to occur, and more intelligent resourcing to predict where fires are going to land and identify them when they hit the ground. And so I think that we're, without tackling the question that you're posing, which is a reversal of federal land policy to the states, I think we are innovating at an amazing scale in California right now to address this crisis. And I think that it's the seriousness of this is, is also, if we could also approach your question through, what's it mean when we see the scale of these fires alongside California's carbon agenda? Because we're all working hard to do smarter planning to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions. And when one of these fires happens, like for example, just the fires in 2019 alone, were equivalent to 24 million cars on the road for a whole year. And so the other way of looking at that is that fire season effectively erased all of the efforts that this state is applying to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions. And I guess my hopeful part of this is, I think we're all looking at how these lands fit together, and we're trying to be more creative and applying more science on the ground to reduce risks to human health and safety, and to better identify those areas that are most vulnerable to fire risk, that are of most concern to Placer County Water Agency, that are of most concern to residents of Tahoe City or Forest Hill or wherever they may be in the Sierra, to approach this from both a public health and safety standpoint, as well as what does the big picture look like? Where are those lands that are most vulnerable? And how do we actually get on the ground to scale up these efforts to provide forest health? Because what I would argue is, I think that the state of California doesn't have enough money to do this right. Federal government doesn't have enough money to do it right. Private sector doesn't have enough money to do it right in terms of landowners, whether it's timber owners or individual property owners. But if we pool those resources effectively, we can really address this risk in a really comprehensive way that ultimately provides healthier forests across the Sierra Nevada. But in our view, we have 10 years to do this. So we have to really accelerate across all fronts to get this done.
Well, it seems like if you could find a way to privately monetize it the way it was monetized before with the timber industry, that would be so great. But now a big part of the forest is all crumbled and dead, and you can't just haul out big logs, and you can't, and all the timber industry is gone. And to come back, there's all these environmental laws which prohibit, the processing of the biomass, I guess. I mean, it's just it's a complex, I don't know if there's going to be a relaxation on those regulations that kind of prevent that business model. But if you could find a way to privatize it, that would help the taxpayers, because someone could be making money and making products and recycling something and selling it and helping with it. It seems like, but anyway.
So some progress is being made on that. On the innovation side, which that's where private industry excels, and they're doing it. It's going to take time. Jay's integral in that. They're investing in what do we do with this material? There still is opportunity with timber, and then other using the material for other means, as Jay had talked about, distributed timber mills and that kind of thing would help. And then, biomass technology. On the regulatory side, there are some relief. There's some legislation for, easing stream bed alteration permits in the legislature this year and that kind of thing. So that kind of thing is there. I wanted to Director Frost, or sorry, Supervisor Frost. I did want to also contribute to your first question, which is, federal government side of this. I think in time, the state, I think the equity of who pays for this will be distributed appropriately. I think it's incumbent upon us locally to sort of raise our voices on this issue. If you look at, the map that we showed you earlier, we're a big population immediately next to a big forest there. We're very impacted by this in so many ways, from water, delivery of water, to smoke in the sky, right? And I mean, we don't want people leaving because they don't want to live in this anymore. That would be horrible for our economy. And so I really want to say that local leadership is absolutely needed. The money is going to get spent, and what we want is for that money to get spent on our watershed, right? I mean, we're here to advocate for ourselves. Now Jay represents the entire state, and he wants to see the best use of the money, and that's his job, and that's a good thing. But I think that our watershed is one of the critical ones because it has so much invested in it in terms of people and environment.
Yeah, and I will say, in terms of environmental permitting reform, the French Meadows project is a good example of that, because what we actually were able to do in that project was a landscape scale programmatic permit for the work that we were doing in the forest for active forest management. And so I think it's part of the secret sauce in this partnership across local water agencies to the Forest Service to CAL FIRE and the Sierra Nevada Conservancy and all the Placer County, others involved in this, is really that we're kind of all hands on deck. We're really trying to be, yes, I represent the environmental perspective and how forests we think should be managed to protect biodiversity and ecological values of both the American River freshwater system as well as the forest. But we're all in it together. And that, I think, is what we're trying to kind of step back on and think, if we're working in this in a real crisis frame, how do we kind of check our affiliations at the door and come forward with partnerships that really move us all forward and provide, candidly, an example for the state and the country, and certainly the Western United States to follow.
Well, thank you for all that you guys are doing. You're obviously immersed in it. I think it's fascinating. It's fascinating to learn about it. And I have compassion for those who live up in those communities who are managing all of this. So thank you for your very interesting presentations. And thanks for addressing my question.
Thank you. It looks like next up is Director Clark Kretz.
Thank you very much. I echo those sentiments. This has been incredibly interesting and fascinating. And to Supervisor Frost's points and very, very excellent questions, are you working with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management as well? I haven't really heard you mention them, and I just wanted to know what their role is in all this.
We are, yes, they are definitely part of the California Forest Action Plan effort, and across Placer County and El Dorado County, the lands are substantially in Forest Service ownership. But that's why they're playing a more significant role in this region.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands up. Thank you very much. Again, we really appreciate it. I think you've made us, at the very least, much more aware. So thank you very much. And it actually segues perfect into our next information item, where we're going to talk about our regional, or the strategic park and trail strategic plan. And Victoria Cacciatore is going to be leading that conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as Director Gallardo noted, I'm here to provide the update on the work and pivots that we have gone through thus far that will soon culminate in the identification of a regional connected trail network. There is an attachment that outlines the workflow of a lot of what we've done to date, but I'm going to go over a bit more of the deliverables that we have and sort of recap what we've learned so far and how all of this is going to build onto each other before we go into identifying the guideposts for our network identification next month. So long ago in a pre-pandemic world, we started with our existing conditions analysis. And what we had learned from that was that 41% of our residents, or 41% of our residents are living within a half mile of a connecting trail. So a trail that they may be able to use to get to different destinations that they would like to go to, or at minimum, go out for an out and back mile walk. What we did see was that lower income residents were 30% less likely to have these connecting trails or these opportunities to have that recreational walk out and back. And so that was one of our starting points of figuring out exactly what our starting point was and whether or not we were in a good space with our almost 500 miles of trails across the 6 counties, or where we might want to focus our improvements. Following our existing conditions analysis, we also did a review of almost 80 local or predominantly local plans, and then a small handful of regional nature plans and an even smaller number of statewide plans to identify shared goals that you would see again and again across the region of what is important to you when you're looking at your trail connections, and what is important to you when you're looking at your other active transportation connections. What are you trying to achieve with the access that you create as part of your active transportation networks and your trail networks? What we saw from reviewing all of your local plans upon which your cities and counties are built is that safety is important, as you would expect. Safety is how we stay alive when we're going to be biking and walking places. Networks that invited people of all ages and abilities to ride and walk and scoot. Economic vitality, so the way that these trails and active transportation connections helped people get to jobs or to schools, or how they created the sort of place that people enjoy living. Environmental justice was important, as how we can ensure that people have equitable access to safe transportation options. Health was important, especially as we got into the pandemic, but more on that in a bit. And recreation was also one of the driving factors that identified how people prioritized trail connections and active transportation connections. So when we had presented the access and these goals to city and county staff and other invested partners, community serving organizations, they really drilled down to how economic vitality, environmental justice, and health were going to be really important to how our region was able to strategically invest and look at important connections that are going to help bring us out of the pandemic and then also help our region become even stronger than before. As part of our conversation with local staff, and also what we shared with the board last year, we heard that there are a number of different challenges that come into play when people are looking to implement connected trail networks. One of which is a more localized challenge that is always going to be led by city and county staff and the community serving organizations, which was that the engagement behind these trails and the connections that they'll make needs to be meaningful. It's not something where even if there is something that's identified as a potentially beneficial alignment through a connected regional parks and trails plan, there still needs to be a learning from what the community has to say about those trails and about those connections and whether that's where they want to go. While I was just saying that this is going to be a more locally driven effort and involve the community level groups, this is something that SACOG would be able to help with primarily through upcoming programs that we'll hear more about later this year, such as the Engage, Empower, and Implement program. Another place where SACOG was pointed to as in we could be very helpful in that is overcoming both infrastructure and institutional barriers. So infrastructure barriers, when you're talking about some of those, some of the freeways that bisect communities, impassable railroads, rivers, these different things that divide us, that you will need to make some connections to if we're going to have a network that connects every community to the next one over. But there are also the institutional barriers that there are people that maybe we work with them in some capacities, but not so much on transportation networks. So if you're looking at reclamation districts, you may work with your reclamation districts for any number of reasons, but probably not for how you can provide a connecting trail through that area. And then the same goes for flood control agencies. It may not be on your top 5 list of ways that you are collaborating with that agency because perhaps there's not a solid enough understanding or consensus built around that would be an important connection to make. And so people would look to SACOG for how we can help bring all of these plans together and identify which relationships may have the potential or could be formed in a way that does create that co-benefit of transportation and recreational access too. And we also have shared with you some of the different opportunity corridors, because when we are looking at what does it take to connect all of the communities throughout the region, what does it take to bring that access into for lower income residents in the region to greater parity, we don't have planned trail connections or other planned low stress, high comfort connections in all of those areas. And so we may have to get a little creative. We may have to have some that SACOG can work with local agencies to identify what are some possible options to explore to make these connections a reality, such as inactive rail corridors, canals, levees, and so on. And then most recently, the last big mile marker before we get into the network identification, and also I owe many of you a debt of gratitude for your help in our promotion of this, was our outreach survey that just closed earlier this week. It closed on Monday. We had over 3,000 completed surveys and an even higher number of surveys where people maybe didn't click submit, but they filled out a good amount of information aside from that. And we are now about to jump headfirst into seeing what we can learn from that outreach, what people had to say about both what they value in their current trails and their connections. So what our region is doing well, but then also what they aspire to be able to bike, walk, or scoot to. So where we can grow next. So it's going to be a very busy month for SACOG staff, and I'm hopeful that my team is all ready and getting ready to buckle down on this as we look to see how the engagement results align with how they support or how they maybe go slightly contrary to what we've been assuming are these goals up until this point, how we're going to structure a network identification around those 6 goals with special attention to the economic vitality, the health, and the environmental justice outcomes. So this is something of a preview of what's going to be coming back next month, as we will have conducted some analysis on the outreach results by then. But there will be a lot to discuss with that, and we would be looking for the formal direction from the Transportation Committee and then the board about how we launch the network identification efforts, working with city staff, county staff, Parks and Rec staff, and so on, to identify the connected network that is going to make equitable connections. So with that, I will take any questions or early input on what you want us to consider as we dive into the outreach results.
Thank you, Victoria. Any questions on this item? I think we don't have enough information yet to get it, but I know we are all really looking forward to seeing what the results are going to come back. So I think it'll be pretty fascinating. I think this last year, I'm sure all my other board members are getting the same input. I've never seen trails be more important than what we've just seen this last year. It is a constant for us. And I think it's such a great positive to look at it and see people are looking for ways to connect now. I know I've talked with my fellow council members in Loomis and in Roseville and Rockland, and even out to Lincoln, how easily it would be for us to connect and really truly make some great pathways. So I'm excited to see your results. Thank you so much. Well, thank you all. Moving on with that, we do have an opportunity on our agenda. If you have anything you'd like to share with us, it's an opportunity for our reports. So committee members, anything special you'd like to share with us about happening in your jurisdiction? I see Sean, I see a hand. Go ahead, Director Harris.
Yeah, I wish you could see a video too. My apologies once again for that. But just to piggyback on what Victoria just talked about, I had the opportunity to participate in May is Bike Month, a short video with SACOG, and they came up and we did a couple minutes, just basically touting the importance of awareness of bicycles and all the options that we've just heard. It's really nice to be a part of something that is a win-win, no matter almost how you look at it, every which way. It's a very positive thing. And we have, again, Yuba City had an opportunity to participate in that. It was my honor to do so. We're looking forward to taking advantage of some opportunity that we identified up here to incorporate our bike paths to link over the river with Marysville, Yuba County, and hopefully beyond. And again, all the reasons were already mentioned, but I think we even go a little bit deeper, and I think I can foresee an opportunity for us to even create a sense of identity through having that bike path available in our area. I mean, we're going to literally change the map of Yuba City. You're going to see a green stripe right down the middle, right through town, and it's going to be really nice, and we're looking forward to it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Director Harris. I'm looking forward to that. I promise we'll throw the bikes in the truck and get up there and test that out. So thank you.
Please do.
We'll do it. Director Gore.
Well, and now that Director Gallardo has an e-bike, she can get around anywhere very easily, which I saw during May's Bike Month promotion. But staff did encourage me to challenge everybody to actually use your bike this month during May's Bike Month, whether that's to work or just for recreation or going to the store. And so I'm going to encourage you all to do that. I am going to ride my bike to work. It's only a couple of miles, so hold me accountable. I better get that done before the end of this month, and I've always wanted to, but now is my chance to do so. So I look forward to doing that, and hopefully hearing from you as well when you do that this month.
Thank you so much. We had a wonderful time as well. And with Supervisor Gore and I and my one of my council members, Ken Broadway, we got to do a little video as well for May is Bike Month. And I explained to people that yes, my electric bike gives you a boost, but the 111 miles I've put on there since October are 111 I wouldn't have put on my other bike that's still hanging, collecting dust in the garage. So I am committed. You will see I'm going to be riding my bike to a couple council meetings and everywhere I can remember it. You just have to sometimes take that minute to think about it and say, oh my gosh, I could ride my bike. So hopefully we will all do that. Thank you for the challenge. Anyone else have something they'd like to share about their jurisdiction this month? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands out there. Nope. So from then we will move on then to receive and file, and it's our blueprint implementation activities. Jennifer, anything you wanted to share on that as we're moving through?
I think Jennifer had to drop off, but she asked me if there were any questions or anything on the items on there. I'm happy to answer those. But yes, work on implementing the blueprint and our MTP is moving forward. So we are churning out letters of support. I know there's a Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program going. I think we've got some requests for letters of support coming in, trickling in slowly now. So we expect some more of those, but we are marching forward with implementation of our plans.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Oh, I've been joined by my friend. I think he sees your dog photos. Say hi, Baha. Well, thank you very much. With that, we are going to be adjourned. We're meeting again, on June 3rd. And thank you all. Appreciate it. Go ride your bikes, and we'll talk to you next month.